So now, so you are able to see the screen, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So anyway, so we will start our discussion. So last class, we have this last week. Okay. So we have seen how to describe the earthquakes, like both subjective scale, objective scale, magnitudes, intensities, and all those things we have seen. So last class we have seen that in detail about magnitude. Okay. So magnitude is basically some logarithm of this amplitude. So these are the four scales which we have set. Okay. Local, body wave, surface wave, moment, magnitude. Apart from that, there are also other magnitudes are also available, but they are not widely used. Okay, so these are the one, and finally the one which is widely used nowadays is the moment magnitude. Okay, so this we have discussed in our last class. Okay, so this is how the Richter's magnitude comes. This one. So this is old Richter magnitude, and it just takes the maximum amplitude. That maximum amplitude corresponds to what waves we can't say. Okay. Now this body waves comes where you measure body wave amplitude, otherwise surface wave magnitude. Finally we said the surface waves, body waves, they saturate also up to some after some limit itself, but so they can still be used to detect nuclear explosion, earthquakes. The differences one can do with this magnitudes also. So this is a final definition of moment magnitude. So this is a definition of seismic moment: shear modulus, rupture area, and then slip offset. It is like force into that lever arm kind of a thing, and then you take logarithm set, you get this moment magnitude. Okay, so this is what you see we discussed in our last class, and we have also seen the frequency of earthquakes also. So the frequency is as magnitude increases in a given year, when the magnitude decreases, automatically one decimal gets added up. Okay, so this is what we call as a logarithmic kind of a thing. So earthquake frequency, say, it also depends on this power law, so that we are calling as Gutenberg-Richter law itself. Okay, which if you take logarithm set, you can write in terms of a straight line kind of a thing. Okay, so this also we have said in the last class, and finally we have also said there are some special earthquakes are there, characteristic earthquakes. Okay, so they don't follow Gutenberg Richter, they follow their own. They have some typical the periodicities which we call as the characteristic earthquakes, and people have reported also, even in abroad, even in India also, some earthquakes no small magnitude earthquake will occur. Same magnitude similar earthquake occurs frequently, so that is special these earthquakes. And finally we said how do we describe the faults. Okay, so generally mathematical way is you write the equation of a plane. Okay, ax plus by plus cz plus some d is equal to 0. So this is how we write, or in our mechanics, advanced structural mechanics is say, so we write the, instead of talking in terms of a plane, we talk in terms of the direction cosines. Okay, now in seismologists or geology, we define any plane say through three angles. One is a strike angle, then other one is the dip angle, and other one is this rake angle. Okay, so strike is with respect to north, then dip is how much inclination actually with respect to the the surface. Then we have the slope, the slip angle. The slip will tell you the other side of the fault, in what direction you see it has moved itself. So these are the three the angles which seismologists use to describe this type of faults itself. Okay, so now we have to see how seismologists say, how they would describe faults. So they do some type of a graphical the format. Okay, so graphical format they use, which are also known as beach balls. Okay. Beach balls are focal mechanism solutions. Okay, so they represent in terms of a the pictorial you see the format kind of a thing. Okay, so now there are several projections which are available in mathematics to, if you want to show a three-dimensional body say, and if you want to project it to a paper that is in 2 dimensions, there are several ways are there. One is what we call as orthographic projection, nomic projection is there, then equal area projection is there, then stereographic the projections are there. See, like for example, this is my circle. Okay, so I have a circle here. Now circle is in 2 dimensions. Okay, so this circle I want to project it onto 1 dimensional, onto a straight line say. How do I project a circle onto a straight line? Okay, so one way is you take all the points on the circle, say, okay, so you project them just on the this line itself. Okay, so this point gets, suppose if I have a point, this one, so this point gets mapped to somewhere here, and I may have suppose if I take this point, say, so this point may get projected to here, so this point also will get projected to this itself. Okay, so this type of projection we call as, you see, orthographic projection. Okay, now nomic projection is like this. So this is a point, say, okay, so this is my center of the circle is taken as origin, so I project like this. So in this point, say, okay, so you can project only the half of the circle, otherwise this goes other direction itself. Then there is a stereographic projection, which is the one which is widely used in the seismology. So the origin is taken here. Okay, so now I have a point here, say, so this circle set is projected onto this point actually. Now similarly, if I have a point like this point is here, if I want to project it to a onto the this line, so we do like this. Okay, so this gets projected here. Okay, now similarly, if I have a point here, say, it gets projected here. If I have a point here, say, it gets projected, you see, somewhere the here. So half of the circle, say, so if I take this one, so this gets projected here. You are seeing here the black one, so this is the projected one actually. Okay, so this is, I am showing you 2D to 1D, 3D to 2D. Say in 3D you are having a sphere. Okay, so now you take a ball, and then your origin is on the top of the ball, and then you see you project all the points onto a surface, so you will see these type of lines. So this inner black one shows the half of the sphere, that is the hemisphere, which is the downside. These red lines, say, they all indicate you follow, right, the outside the sphere, that is these points actually. So this point, say, they will very far away, they get projected. Okay, like this point also, say, they get projected, but whereas if you see this point, it gets projected here itself. Okay, so this is what we call as a stereographic projection. Then we also have equal area projections also. So you take equal area and then you project it also several ways one can do. So when you make a sphere, so you are having a sphere in 3 dimensions. Now you have to project it to a 2-dimensional object. Okay, so a sphere, if you have so this is in 3D. So this whatever inside it is a 2D to 1D. Okay, circles to lines it is. But if you are having a sphere, say, 3D to 2 dimensions. Okay, so this is my orthographic projection. So in orthographic projection, if I project a sphere, so it looks like this. Then this is a stereographic projection, this is equal area projection, and this is, you see, nomic the projections we have. So now to represent the faults, so these how you see the seismologists they do like this. Okay, so stereographic projection. So you take a sphere, okay, which is a complete 3-dimensional. So this is my fault plane. Okay, so this is my fault plane, which is here. So this is my fault plane, which have with some strike angle and with some the dip angle which we have. Okay, so now this is sphere, say, you project this fault plane on my the sphere kind of a thing. So this is my fault plane having some strike angle and having some dip angle kind. Anyway, strike, you for the time being assume strike to be 0, you take only the dip angle actual. So now this is my fault plane. Okay, so now what we try to do is to project this onto a sphere. So this is my surface, the 2-dimensional surface. Okay, this is my, so I have to project everything here. So now my origin is at the top for stereographic projection. So now this point of the fault plane, say, so this gets mapped to this place actually. Okay, and this point will get projected to this place, and this point, say, will get projected to here, and this point, you see, will project to here. So finally the entire fault plane becomes a curved kind of a thing on this sphere itself. Okay, this is how it looks like this one. So this is what it happens. So when you are doing this stereographic projection, say, so the lines becomes the points, and the plane becomes a curved line. So this is my plane. This is my plane. Okay, so which is in the sphere. So this entire plane, say, because of stereographic projection, it has become a curve actually on this surface. Okay, so this is how you see we represent these type of fault planes on a sphere, the 2-dimensional body. So the concept here is we have a sphere. So now this is sphere, say, we are projecting onto a 2-dimensional thing, that is a paper kind of a thing, and then you see we are trying to represent, you see, how the faults looks like that. So this is how the fault plane solutions looks like. So you have a bowl, okay, that is a hemisphere is there. So this is my fault plane. Okay, this blue one, say, this is my fault. Okay, so now this we have to project, or this we have to show how it looks like on the paper itself. So we have, and generally in the earthquakes, they are basically shear type of phenomena. Okay, so you all of you know, right, what is a speciality about shear stresses? No, so shear stresses, what's the speciality? If you see that stress tensor, right, sigma xy, sigma yx, and then sigma yy in 2 dimensions. Now what is the speciality about shear? What is the speciality about shear stresses?
Sigma xy is equal to sigma yx.
What do you call that property? You know?
Complementary.
What do you call this property?
Complementary shear stress.
Complementary shear stress. What it tells is, if I have a plane, say, so this one, both this is my sigma xy, say, so this one will be say sigma yx. So shear stresses are complementary. So this plane, whatever shear stress is acting, 90 degrees also same shear stress will be there. So earthquakes is also shear type of phenomenon. So when you draw one plane, say, other plane also, you have to draw, that is this plane, because of the complementary shear stresses. So this plane in seismology, so they call this as auxiliary plane. Okay, it is like a fictitious kind of a thing. So this is my nodal plane and this is my auxiliary plane, they say, but this comes because shear stresses are complementary. Okay, so now how they do like this? So this is my sphere. So you cut this into two pieces. You remove the top portion. So now I am having one the hemisphere kind of a thing. So now this hemisphere, say, now we have to project it onto a sphere. Okay, onto the paper. So now if I see this is my fault plane, say, so this is my fault plane, or this is my fault plane with some dip angle. Okay, so I will put this fault plane in a sphere. So this is my original fault plane. So now what I have to do, so this fault plane, I have to project it onto the surface actually. So this is my the fault plane here. Okay, so now suppose if I have a fault plane which is 90 degrees, say, where it will get projected. See, like for example, I have a fault plane, say, like this, which is a perfect this one. Now where this will get projected? And this is the origin. This is the origin. So how do that looks like? It looks like a curved line or a straight line?
Straight line.
Straight line.
So this is my line. So this line indicates what is the dip angle of this line? The fault is perfectly vertical, this type of fault actually.
90 degrees.
90 degrees actual. Okay, so you can see the dip angle. So now this is my dip angle. So now the fault is perfect, this rectangular, perfectly 90 degrees dip, say. So 90 degrees dip, if you project on a stereographic projection, it looks like a straight line. Curved means with some dip. Suppose if dip is 0, say, how does it looks? So this is my plane, two-dimensional plane. Okay, so now this is one part. So now this one, so this portion, whatever we are drawing, say, so this indicates dip angle of 0 degrees, whereas this indicates dip angle of 90 degrees actually. Other dips, say, you will be having several lines like this actually. Okay, so this is how the stereographic projection, say, it looks something like this because of this projection. Okay, so now here so this is how these planes they look like. So this one indicates the perfect this one, say, the dip angle is the outside. So this plane will have dip angle of 0. Now whereas this one, say, which is perfect straight, so this has a dip angle of
90 degrees.
90 degrees. So this is how we represent. So this curve, say, it represents your dip angle. So that is how they project these faults. So this is how the stereo nets are there. So this is my north. Okay, so this is my south direction, and this is east, and this is west actually. So now this outer this one. So what is the dip of this one? So this outer one. So what is the dip?
0 degrees.
0 degrees. Okay. So now this straight line. You can see here this dip angle is what is the dip angle?
90 degrees.
90. You can see here 90 degrees. Okay, because of stereographic projection. Now this is 60 degree dip actually. Okay, then we have 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, like that it has. Now this portion, say this side, what is a dip angle? So this is what dip. What is the dip angle of this? Here also you have a 60. What is this? This 60, that's 60. What's the difference between these two?
Both are perpendicular to it. I mean to
So
complement.
60 degrees, this is what? No, this side, this side.
One is auxiliary plane and
No, not auxiliary plane. See, this is east direction. This is west direction. Okay. So now dipping towards east, dipping towards west. So if the fault plane is dipping, say, so now like here you can see, so this is at one fault plane. So now you can have a fault plane which is dipping towards, you see, other side also. So you have a fault which is dipping like this. Okay. Let us say it is a 45 degrees dip one. Now you can have a fault plane which is dipping like this also. You followed. So this is also 45 degrees only, but this is dipping towards east, whereas this is dipping towards west. That is how the indication is this one. Okay. So now here so this 60 degrees, you can see this is dipping this side. This is dipping east side actually. So these are the lines. And of course, this is a vertical, the north-south vertical dips. 90 degrees will be like this. So outside circles are all 0 degrees kind of a thing, which we have. So this 60 say. So the meaning of this one is, the strike angle of the fault plane is 0 degrees. It is perfectly oriented towards north, and it has a dip angle of 60 degrees, but it is dipping towards west actually. Now here, so this one side, this indicates this fault has a strike angle of 0 degrees and it is dipping 70 degrees towards east itself. So this is how the stereographic nets people draw, and this one is 90 degree like that if we write to indicate. So if you are having a fault plane which is dipping towards like this, okay. So this one I'm just drawing as this one. So 70 degrees, this is this. The meaning of this one is this, whereas the meaning of this one say. So the fault is also dipping towards this side. So that is 60 degrees. But this is dipping towards this side. So this is east and this is west. So that is how they indicate these numbers. And then suppose if you want to draw a fault, say, okay, with the 45 degrees and dip is 60 degrees. So strike angle is not, strike angle is measured with respect to north-south direction. So now what we try to do is, so first of all, this is my stereo net. Okay. So we assume that the strike angle is 0. That means we start with this one. And then we draw a 60 degree dipping lane. Okay. So this is my 60 degree dipping lane. Okay. Now I have to measure that the strike angle is 45 degrees. So 45 means if this is my north direction, say this is my south, and this is east and this is west, say. So my fault is oriented like this. So the angle is 45 degrees and it is dipping like this. Okay. And this dipping is 60 degrees. So now what we do is, so we first draw a 0 degree strike, 60 degrees dip line, and then we rotate actually. Okay, such that we have this 45 degrees. So now you can see, so this is a 10, 20, 30, 40. So this is a 10 degree, 20 degree, 30 degree, then 40 degree, and then this is 45, and this is anyway 50 degrees. So whole stereographic net you rotate like this. Okay, so this tells you that my fault is 45 degrees is my strike angle, and then dip angle is 60 degrees. So in the stereo nets, curved lines they indicate the faults. Suppose if I want to draw, what will be this plane? Suppose if I have like this, say, what is the strike angle and dip angle of this plane? Approximately. Now, or if I take this line, now what will be this strike angle after rotating? No, 45 degrees only, but dip is
60 degrees west.
60 degrees west actually. So now if I want to draw, strike is you see 90 degrees. So where that comes, strike 90 degree and dip is 60 degrees. So where did it come? So this is 50, 60, 70, 80, then this is 90. You followed. So the plane will be like this. You followed. So this is how it comes like this. So this means, you see, the strike angle is 90 degrees, and then dip is, you know, the 60 kind of a thing. Okay, so this is how, you know, it turns out to be, you know, these, you know, how do we represent these faults. So this is how. So now let us say I want to mark a fault which has a strike 109 degrees and dip is 55 degrees southwest. So southwest means, so this is north, this is south, and this is east, and this is west. So now this fault is in which quadrant? Southwest means.
Third quadrant.
So now strike angle is 109. So this is 90 degree. Okay, 109 means, you know, somewhere you followed, right? So this is my fault. So this is my 109 degrees. Okay, the fault is like this, and it is dipping towards which side? Towards the southwest or other side, northeast. It is dipping towards southwest. Okay, so the fault is, you know, something like this. You followed? It is projecting like this. Suppose if it was other direction, say it will be like this. So this is north, south, and then this is west, and this one east. Suppose let us say I draw a fault like this, which is 109 degree. Okay, the strike angle is 109, but if it is dipping towards this side, say what will be, how do you represent this one? So we represent this as strike angle 109 degree, dip is how much? 55 degree. How do we write this one if it is dipping other side?
Northeast.
Northeast actual. Okay, so this is how, you know, we indicate. Now we have to represent in the you know, the stereograph. So this is how we draw. So now this is my 109 degree strike angle, and this is my plane, and dip is 55 degrees actually, and this is oriented in this direction. Suppose if it was in other direction, say, so then you know, it will go in this direction actually. Okay, so there's a plane will be, you see, something like this, it will be there. That is on the other side if it was in the northeast, but now it is in the southwest direction. Okay, so this is my fault. So now this I have to represent in my stereograph. So what to do is, you know, so first this is my north. Okay, like a graph sheet, you know, the stereograph net also happens. So now, as already I told you, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, then this is my 90. Okay, perfect 90. Then this becomes 100. Then this becomes 110 degrees. Now our 109 is somewhere here. So you mark this line. So this is my strike angle actual. Okay. So now you rotate the stereographic net such that you know, so this is my 109 degree. So you assume that you followed, right? This is anyway north. So now the dip angle has to be measured. So the dip angle, say, so because it is southwest, you know, so you know, we draw like this. So this is my dip angle. So you can see north is here, south is here. So assuming this one, so we draw this 55 degrees, you know, this one. So this is my fault. Now you have to rotate actual. So now finally this becomes north angle. So this is 109. So this is my curve actually. Then this one. So this tells you. So this curve tells you that it is a fault which is you know, which is having a strike angle of 109 degrees and the dip angle is, you know, 55 degrees, you know, southwest. So that is how, you know, we mark this faults. Okay. Now this also, suppose if you want to plot a points also, you can plot. Okay, azimuth 40 degrees, then, you know, takeoff angle 60 degrees, say. So you can study, you know, in Wikipedia also, you see the azimuth, how do they represent, you know, these things on a stereographic procedure. So this also we can represent. Okay, so 40 degrees and then takeoff angles, you know, you can measure. Okay, because all the stations is they do these type of projections. Not only here, even air traffic is there, right? When flights are going, you know, other things when they're moving, say, so they use these type of you know, the projections. Okay, so now this is how you see the stereo nets, you know, so you can plot a line. So this is a line, 239 degrees is a strike and 43 degrees is the dip angle, say. So you can easily measure. So this is 0 degrees strike, this is 90 degrees strike, and this is 180 degrees strike is here. Then this is a 270 actually. Okay, so this is a 239 degrees here and 43 degree, you know, you can measure and you can plot all these lines itself. So now, you know, so this is how you see they plot. So you are having you know, this fault plane, say 109 degrees, you can plot you know, all these points also. So if I'm having a point on the same plane, say, I can model the follow, right? The distance also, you see, you can get from this stereo nets. So now coming to the fault planes, you see, they do like this. So as already I told you, shear stresses are you know, the complementary So basically what happens is, you will be having two planes. One is a main plane, other one is a nodal plane. Okay. So this is how it turns out to be. And then, shear, what happens whenever you are having a pure shear, say, what will be the Mohr circle for pure shear? See, I have a shear stresses like this, pure shear. What will be its Mohr circle? How does the Mohr circle look like for a pure shear? At 45 degrees angle, what it will be?
It is a circle origin at center.
So 45 degrees plane, what it will be for pure shear? So this is my Mohr circle for pure shear. Okay. So 0 comma tau, and you will be having 0 comma minus tau or whatever you have. So now on 45 degrees plane, that is in Mohr circle, if it is 90, in reality it is 45 degrees. Now what happens if you rotate by 45 degrees, say, what type of stresses will be there? For pure shear.
Normal stress.
Now one plane, what type of stresses will be there? See, for pure shear, I rotate by 45 degrees. Okay, what will be the stresses on these planes?
Normal stress of same magnitude.
What magnitude? This plane, what it will be? What type of stresses will be on this plane? What type of stresses will be on this plane? This plane, this plane, these planes.
Normal stress.
No, what type of normal stresses? Compression or tension?
Tension.
See here the Mohr circle, 0 tau, 0 minus. So this is for pure shear. So 45 degrees, what are the stresses? One is tau comma 0, other side it is minus tau comma 0. So what does it tells you? One plane it is?
One plane it is compression, other it is tension.
So one side it is tension, other side it is compression at 45 degrees plane. That is what we say. Okay, so for pure shear, say, so they call this as a push. Push means you see tension, pull means you see the compression kind of a thing. You followed. So this is on a 45 degrees plane. In ordinary plane it is a pure shear. Okay, at 0 degrees. So now when you rotate by 45 degrees, so you will have this compression, tension kind of a thing. So this is how you see we indicate the shear stresses. Okay, so now to describe faults, say, so now this is my fault. Okay, so now I have to describe this plane, actually this fault plane. So now using my stereograph projection, say, so I assume that this fault is located here. This is my fault plane, the main fault plane. And because shear stresses are complementary, so I will be having an auxiliary plane also, which is exactly you followed, right? 90 degrees or whatever. Auxiliary plane also will be there. Okay, so now this is my fault plane. If I plot it in the stereograph projections, strike angle is 45, dip angle is some 60 degrees dip angle, say. So this is my fault plane, and this is my auxiliary plane itself, actually. So this is how it looks. So now what I will do is I will plot like this. So now this is what type of a fault here? Thrust or strike slip or normal? The above fault. What type of fault is this? Both are moving away from each other. What type of a fault it is?
Normal fault.
Divergent.
Normal fault it is. So normal fault means what type of stresses will be there here?
Tension.
Tension. Okay, because things are going away from each other, so you will be having inside, you see, tension will be there. Okay, so the notation is here it is a tension, so outside it is a compression, actually, because of that auxiliary plane. So tension is written in white color, this is written in the black color. So now this is how you see the beach ball solutions looks like, actually. So this is what we call them as the beach ball. So beach balls, it indicates the strike angle, dip angle of the fault, and its auxiliary plane, and it also tells you what type of fault it is, actually. Okay, so that is how a normal fault say. It looks something like this. And now this is now you can see the same problem. What type of fault is this one?
Thrust fault.
Thrust. So thrust means things are like India and Asia kind of a thing. So what will be the type of stresses inside this fault when things are coming close to each other? You will be having
Compression.
So outside it will be tension, inside it is a compression. You can see these two figures. Both a strike is same, dip is same, everything is same. One is a normal, other one is a thrust actual. So what is happening when it is a thrust means inside becomes black, outside becomes, you see, white. That means the tension is outside and it is a compression kind of a thing. So this is what we call as, you see, a beach ball actually. And this beach ball, the curved lines say they represent a strike angle, dip angle of the fault, and the color say it tells you, whether it is a thrust fault or a normal fault. Now we will see for strike slip fault actually. Okay. And now strike slip faults. So let us say this is a perfect fault, which is, the dip is 90 degrees actually. So when dip is 90 degrees, say how does the lines looks like? Dip is 90 means you will have a curved or a straight line. 90 degrees.
Straight line.
So this is my straight lines. Okay. So this is one line here, another line. This is my auxiliary plane. So these are my two fault planes actually. Now what type of stresses will be there in a strike slip fault?
Shear.
Pure shear. So when it is a pure shear on 45 degrees plane, what type of stresses will be there?
Tension and compression.
So one side you will be having tension, other side you will be having compression. So you can see TT here, compression actually. So this is like our that Mohr circle, that 45 degrees concept itself. So if we are having, so now you can see, so now when you compare to normal and thrust faults, normal thrust faults have only like 3 quadrants, black, white, and then black. Then you have having white, black, and this one. But when it comes to strike slip faults, how many quadrants are there?
4.
4 will be there followed, right? So 4 means generally, it is like a strike slip. It is like, 3 means you followed, right? You should be able to, understand actually. So now you can have, so now this is one thing. So strike slip with normal faulting actually. Okay. So it is a combination. You are having a normal faulting plus you are also having a strike slip also. So then, the quadrants, you see, they indicate like this. Suppose if it is a perfectly like this, equal, and all the quadrants are of same size, we call as a strike slip. But when you are having this strike slip with normal faulting also, then you will see like this. So inside it is, you followed a tension, and outside it is, you see, compression. So you have normal faulting, right? So you can see this is my normal faulting. So this plus this actually. Okay. So two things are there. So then here it is white color inside, black color you followed it outside actually. Now similarly say this is a strike slip with a thrust faulting component actually. So the quadrants are not of same size. So inside it is a compression and here it is you followed a tension kind of a thing. And there are 4 quadrants are there and 4 quadrants are not of equal size and other things. So you can say that you followed it. It is basically a thrust fault only, but you are also having strike slip, the components also, both of them are there. So this is how, we look like this. So these are what we say. So for normal fault, say this is the beach ball actually. Okay. Pure normal. So there is no shear, nothing is there, only pure normal. Now this is a pure reverse fault or thrust fault. Reverse and thrust, both of them are same. Okay. And if it is a pure strike slip, say the beach balls, so look, something like this. Okay. So this is what they say. So this is, for with respect to the slip angle. Okay. So this is a pure thrust. So pure thrust means, the lambda, that is this lambda, which we already shown. This is the lambda. So now you can see. So this is what is the lambda is. Oh God. Now, so if you see this figure, right? So if I am just deleting this one for time being, yes. Yeah. So you can see here the slip angle, that is the lambda. Okay. So this lambda indicates, you see, the other side of the fault, so how it is moving actually. So now if lambda is 90, say, what type of fault it is? Lambda is 90. So this side of the fault, how it is moving? If lambda is 90. So this is my fault.
Strike slip.
Now be careful. Okay. Lambda is 90. How this other side of the fault is moving? Upwards actually, you followed. So it is moving on top of the fault. So lambda is equal to 90 or lambda 0. So what does it indicate? Lambda 0.
Strike slip fault.
So lambda is 0 means you followed it. It is moving just like this actually. It is a strike slip fault. When lambda is 90 degrees, say. So how it is moving the other side of the fault plane, which is located here. So this fault is moving, you see, on the top of this one. So you can see here also. See. Like for example here, say thrust faults. Now thrust fault, what is lambda? This portion, how it is moving actually. This side of the fault, it is in which direction it is moving when it is under compression. So this is moving above this fault. So what is lambda? What is lambda? So it is 90 degrees actually. So now if it is a normal fault, say this fault, what is lambda here? This side, how it is moving with respect to this side? It is moving this way. This is downwards actual. Okay, so when it is moving down, so what is lambda value?
Minus 90 degrees.
Minus 90, or you can call this as 270 or whatever. Okay, so this is how you see the lambda indicates you know how which direction you see the other faults, the other things are moving. So lambda is 0, say that means strike slip. If lambda is 90, say then it is a thrust fault. If lambda is a 270 or that minus 90 or something, so which means this side of the fault it is moving down with respect to this one. So that is a normal the fault itself. So these are the beach balls, how they look like. Okay, so lambda is equal to 90. It is a thrust fault, pure this itself. Then you have lambda is equal to 270. Lambda 270 same as lambda is equal to minus 90. So you can see this figure and this figure, both of them are same. One is a thrust, another one is normal. You can see inside it is white, outside it is black. Whereas here inside it is a compression, outside it is tension itself. Now when lambda is equal to 0 or lambda is equal to 180, what is happening? Lambda is equal to 180. Lambda 180 means what does it indicate? Up or down or right side or left side?
Strike slip fault, sir.
Strike slip, but it is moving in which direction? See, there are two things out there. So when you see this notation, see lambda 180 means it is moving this way. So lambda 0 means like this actually. So lambda 180 means it is moving in this direction. Right side they say, 0 means left side they say. Okay, so these are the directions. So now these are the three: thrust, strike slip, and then normal. And of course you can draw for lambda is equal to 0 also. That means it's a pure strike slip only, but it will be left lateral actually. Okay. Now apart from that, if lambda is 120 or 150, what does it tells you? So how these faults are moving. So if lambda, it is not this way, it is not above this one. If I have an inclined component, say lambda, what happens when something is inclined? You can always break into sine theta, cos theta kind of a thing. So it will have a component from thrust. It also will have a component from the strike slip also. Then if lambda is 240 degrees, say, so what happens? You will have this type plus combinations of this will be there. So you will be having so combinations. So this 210 indicates strike slip with some dip slip actually. So lambda 120 say dip slip with some strike slip. So you will be having all these components itself. So this color of the beach ball, it indicates the direction, the orientation of the fault plane, and the type of the fault plane. Everything will be spoken by this beach ball itself. Okay, so that's what we said. So beach balls, whatever we have seen, it always will have two curved lines. Why they will have two curved lines? Now, what are these curved lines indicates in beach balls? One line indicates
fault plane.
Other line?
Auxiliary plane.
Why auxiliary plane comes into picture? Because shear stresses are
Complementary.
Complementary. So you can take this plane or you can take this plane, sigma xy or sigma yx. So you will have complementary. Okay. So beach ball, every beach ball will have two planes. Any beach ball you take, say. So whatever you can see, this is one plane. This is another plane will be there. That is compulsory. Okay. Of course, among these two, there is only one is a fault plane. Other one is a fictitious auxiliary plane we say. Okay, so this other one we call as, you see, the auxiliary plane is there, and of course these two planes are orthogonal to each other because shear stresses are complementary. X, Y, YX, you know, these things will be there. Okay, so now generally if somebody gives you the things, now you identify which is a fault plane here. Suppose this figure say this is a fault plane or this is a fault plane. How do you identify? Can you tell which is the correct one, which is a fault, which is auxiliary?
No, sir.
You cannot tell because this is a problem. You see, in seismology we put both the things, but we don't know which is the correct one. So if you want to find out which is the correct one, say, then you have to do some field investigations, and then you see they decide, you see, which is a fault plane and others. But generally, you know, whenever an earthquake occurs, okay, if you all of you, if you see USGS website or Harvard, you know, the CMT, the centroidal, you know, the moment tensor. So all of you can download, you can just check this website, Harvard CMT, centroidal moment tensors, they say. Okay, so if you go to this website, if you see for Nepal earthquake or any other earthquake, say, they report this, you know, the beach ball, you know, the solutions itself. So you can go to this website, you can see these details, you know, how these fault planes they report and other things also. Okay, so now you know, just 1 second. Now, so if you see this Harvard CMT, yes, this is a centroidal. You can see here global centroid movement tensor catalog will be there. Okay, so here you can search. So they will give you, you know, all the details. So if you see the, you know, the standard format, they will do like this. Yeah. So you can see they will do, you followed, right? They will give this moment tensor. You are able to see here some Kermadec Islands region they have given. How they have given here? See, you can see date they will give you, centroidal time they will give you, latitude, longitude, depth, hypocenter they will give you, all these things they will give. Below you, can you see they have given how many?
2.
What is first one is strike angle is 202, dip is 30, slip is 93. Second one 18, 60, 88 they will. Now which is the correct one? You can see here the beach ball also they have given. Can you see here this side? Red color, you know, they have included actual. So what type of fault it is? Tell me.
Thrust.
Yeah, so this is a thrust fault. Okay, and how many quadrants are there? 3 only.
3.
If there are 3 quadrants and so inside it is a color, outside it is you know, something else, then you can blindly say that it is a thrust fault. Now one fault plane is 202 degrees strike, dip is 30, this one. Other one is 18, 60, 88 kind of a thing you have. So now which is the correct one? We can't say. Okay, one is a fault plane, other one is basically, you know, this auxiliary plane. So you can try. You can see, okay, these are some standard format. You see they give all these details. Okay, so if you see some of the recent ones also, you can just see that is, I think 2020, right? This is, yes, 2021. Now, so if you see here magnitudes, everything they give you, okay, more than some 5 magnitude, and then, you know, done. So you can see how many, so many earthquakes are there, right? The first earthquake, say, it occurred in New Britain. What is its magnitude? What is the magnitude of this earthquake? Can you see, all of you?
5 magnitude.
But MW is what magnitude?
5.
Movement magnitude.
MB
means
body waves.
Body wave. So all people report all 3. MS is
Surface.
5.1.
surface waves also. Now you tell me whether it is a nuclear explosion or earthquake.
Surface waves are first. Earthquake.
Yeah. So surface wave magnitude is there. Body wave magnitude is almost 0. So what does it tell you? It is an earthquake or an explosion?
Earthquake.
It's an earthquake.
Earthquake.
So if it was explosion, what you will observe here?
Body surface
Body waves
waves.
will be more.
So MB will be 5, MS will be 0 kind of a thing, or maybe very little. Okay. And now tell me what type of mechanism it is. See the ball here, your right hand side you see a ball. Tell me what type of mechanism it is. How many quadrants are there?
So 4.
4 quadrants means what you should in your mind it should come
Strike sleep.
strike slip, but all quadrants are not same, right? There are some little bit here and there is there. So now in the inside what color is there? It's major.
Black, sir.
No, inside here it is white color, okay, but outside it is a black and inside it is this white itself. So now tell me what type of fault it is.
Normal with strikes.
Normal and strike slip component. And you can see 2 fault planes they report 227, 58, 35, then 338, 61, 143 they report. And you can see the slip angle also. What is the slip angle? Minus 143. So that itself should tell you, okay, what type of fault it is. Minus 143 means you remember, right, this figure. Our fault, where is that lambda? Yes, where is that one? Yes, okay. So 143, the rake angle. So 143 means where it will come, lambda. So this is 90 degrees actual. Okay. So now 90 degrees is here. 143 means somewhere you followed, right? Here it's minus 143, that is okay. So now you have to do in other direction. So it will be something like this. So what type of fault it is? So now you can easily identify from this one. So slip is minus 143 or minus 35, other plane also. So if it is a minus 35, say, okay, using the sign convention, minus 35 means like this it will be. 143 also almost it will be like this only. So minus 35 means, so what type of fault it is? Tell me. It has a strike slip plus. Normal component, okay. That's how you see, you have to see. And now, calm chat. So this earthquake. Now what is its magnitude? The second one. No. 5 MB.
0.
MS.
5.
See now here it is, you see, MS magnitude, MW both are same actually. You followed. And now you see the ball here. Tell me, and slip angle also they have given. What is the slip angle? That lambda. Strike is 54. Dip is 23. That lambda is how much?
89.
89 is close to 90 degrees only. What type of fault it is? Thrust. You see the here how many quadrants are there? 3 are there. And what is inside? Red color. So red is same as our black color there. Okay. So which means it is a thrust fault actually. You can identify, right? Now whether there is any interesting things are there. Let me see. Okay. The last one also you can see Kermadec Island something they have given. The magnitude is 5.1. MS is 5 actual. Okay. So now one plane is 207, dip is 22, slip is 105. What type of fault it is? Tell me. Other auxiliary plane is 84 degrees. Other one is 105 degrees. So what type of faulting it is? And see the beach ball here on your right hand side.
Strike slip and normal thrust.
Strike slip plus thrust, but strike slip component is high or small? 90 degree means it is a thrust. So your slip angle is almost 84 or 105. Although it has a strike slip, but the strike slip component is very, very
Small.
small. Okay, so this way you can easily identify. You can search, okay, in Google, it gives you follow, right, all the things. Indian earthquakes also, I think it may have. I think 2015 it may have, right? Nepal earthquake or something. Done. Oh, okay. So you people have to search minus 90 moment magnitude we have given. Oh, sorry, starting date is here and then ending date is here. So you can search and then you follow, right? Lot of historical magnitudes say, okay. So you can, and if you see 1976, the old ones, okay. Then if I see 8 magnitudes, what happens? Oh, something is there. Oh, start date, end date is same. How come? Oh, sorry, this is number of days. Okay. Oh, it is going like this. Okay, fine. So now you can see. So from 1906 onwards, 8 magnitudes we are looking for. See what is the first magnitude? Tonga Islands or something. So you can see, what type of fault it is. Easily you can identify. Minus 93. What type of fault I say this is?
Normal.
It's a normal. You can see the magnitudes. What is movement magnitude?
8.
Body wave?
6.8.
It's a very low. Surface magnitude they don't have reported. Now if this is second one, say what is movement magnitude? 8.3. Body wave is
7.
move a surface
7.9.
I told you, right? These three you will get different answers. And if you see all the earthquakes, you have body wave or surface waves. Sometimes see this Macquarie Islands region. So what's the movement magnitude is 8, body wave is 6.5, but surface wave magnitude is 8.3. You followed. So you will see, they report all these three. Sometimes, they don't converge. And body wave magnitude, you can see although movement magnitudes are 8, 8.1, 8.2, body wave magnitude will never be higher than, you see, 6.9 or, you will not never get anything. Sometimes one abnormal, see this is 7.4 it has come, okay, but it never comes to 8 or something like that, okay. So you see 8.1, 6.6 it says, this is in Peru, 8.4, 6.7. So like this, you can search and then you follow, right? People can try, okay, these earthquakes also. And the beach balls also, you can practice. So generally, if you register in this website, whenever earthquake occurs, say they will send you, email within just 1 hour of that earthquake. So they will send you like this date, and then they will send you this kind of a ball actually, okay, beach ball. So by looking at the ball, you should be able to identify what type of earthquake it is, how things are going to happen or not. Okay, so these are very easy, and all of you, go to this globalcmt.org, okay, and practice, okay, how this looks like and how to read these numbers and how to interpret them in our things. Okay, so they report 2 fault planes. So when there is, so now which is the correct answer? First or second?
We cannot say.
You cannot say. So to say that, you have to do some extra work. Okay, you have to go to field and then you have to do all kinds of works. So anyway, so you people practice globalcmt.org. Okay, it's a very interesting thing, and if you are in earthquake engineering, so you should be able to interpret all these results. So fine. So this, I think, almost we have covered our fault planes. So just you followed, right? Now. So that's what we said, So large earthquakes are catastrophic, we said, and earthquakes we mitigated, yes. Predicted, nobody can predict earthquakes, okay. They are a very critical phenomenon. Prevented, we have no idea, okay. So anyway, so that's what we said. So why you have to study earthquakes? Their dominant source seismic waves comes into picture, and analysis will give you, lot of other interesting things also, okay. Interior also, as well as for the engineer also, the ground motion also will be there. This is one aspect. And why earthquakes are very, very important is, the seismic waves. So the advantage is, if you study the seismic waves, not only you will find out the ground motion, damages and others, but another great advantage is, you can identify what is inside our earth actually. Okay, it is something like, the ultrasound you would have seen, right? Whenever you have a problem, say nowadays everybody is doing CT scan, MRI and others, right? X-ray kind of a thing. So seismic waves also, once you know the seismic waves, say, so you can treat these seismic waves and then you can go back actually, okay, and then try to find out what it is inside and others. So this is the reason why we have to study, okay. And not only this one, so mainly these seismic waves, say, so you can do to detect nuclear explosions also. I told you, right, MB by MS. So this will help you, okay, which country has done and what the size and others also we can do, okay. So these are some of the websites, and I think all the things are available in online also, okay. The Harvard CMT, if you go, you can easily interpret this focal mechanism solution. So with this, we have completed one unit, that is the fundamentals, if you want to be work in earthquake engineering, say, so you should know all these concepts: magnitude, intensity, you followed intraplate earthquake, interplate earthquakes, then how many types of magnitudes are there, which is the one which is widely used magnitude, and then the focal mechanism solutions, how to interpret them, normal fault, thrust fault, so if you know these things, so that means you know a little bit about this earthquake. So as far as this course is concerned, this much of information is sufficient for us. Okay, so now let us move to the next unit. So we will introduce this one, we will move. So this is our next the unit. Now, so this one is ground motions. Okay. The next unit is on ground motion. Now, so we will move towards this ground motions. Okay, this is second unit. I think 1 second. Oh. Now, so now let us move to this one. Yes. So now the second unit, say, it is on the ground motion itself. Okay, so this is our second thing. So now here but this is very important for our engineering purposes. So now, as already I told you, right, so now in our engineering, say, so we are interested, of course, the fundamentals of earthquakes is very important, but for engineer, the most important thing is that he is more interested about his structure. Okay, so why structure gets damaged, I already told you in our this one, because earthquakes will have resonance, seismic waves, speed of earthquake, all those things we have discussed. So finally, for engineers, the most important thing is this ground motion. Okay, so now what do you mean by ground motion? That it is defined like this. It's not coming. I'm unable to write. No. Yes, now I'm fine. So now for earthquake engineers, the most important thing is these ground motions. Okay, because the ground motion, and then among all the ground motions, say, for engineers, the most important thing is the ground motions, which has sufficient strength to cause serious damage to my structure, is of engineering importance. So this is what we are interested in hazard, and then these type of ground motions, we have to study in great the detail. So for a structural engineer, so the definition of ground motion is is just acceleration time history. Of course, it should be valid in all the frequency ranges, that is from 0 to 25 Hertz, but most of the energy will be concentrated from 0 to 10 Hertz itself. So this is the definition of ground motion for a earthquake engineer. So this is what is the engineer wants. So I'm showing you the strong motion data sets, okay, of Chichi earthquake. So these are the 3 accelerations. Okay, so now our PGS are something around 0.5 G, like that, we get for Chichi earthquake at the magnitude with 7.6 or something like that. And if integrate accelerations, you will get velocity. If integrate velocity, you will get this displacements also. Okay, so these are definition of a ground motion for an earthquake engineer. So now this is one very famous statement, which is states that in earthquake engineering, say, the most fundamental thing is the data itself. So earthquake engineering subject is basically we call as the inverse subject basically. So here the subject, say, the starting point in earthquake engineering, seismology, all the entire things is basically the data. See, in our civil engineering, say, when you study mechanics, what is the starting point in mechanics? See, in mechanics, what's the starting point? You have done, right, mechanics of materials, advanced structural mechanics, all these courses. So in those courses, what's the starting point? How do we start?
By defining internal forces.
No, by defining internal forces, then the kinematics comes, and then equation of motion you followed, right? So this is a starting point in mechanics. But in earthquake engineering and seismology, say the starting point is not equations of motion, is not internal forces, is not anything else. The starting point in earthquake engineering is the data itself, actually. You followed. So this is the first starting point. And here in earthquake engineering seismology, if you see, we will see later on also in hazard analysis also. See, people, the mechanics, it doesn't work in earthquakes because it becomes too complicated also. Mechanics, if you try to do this one, but the everything more or most of the codes, most of the things are all based on this data itself. Okay, so this is one famous thing made by one Professor Husner. Okay, I think he passed away. He's a faculty in Caltech. So he was the person in 1940s or 1930s. He first started this concept of strong motion accelegraph, about recording the seismic earthquakes, how the seismic waves looks like. So the instrumentation was developed in those days in 1940 or 1930s in Caltech. So he was one of the the person, or they say father of earthquake engineering or something like that. So he says the basic data say of earthquake engineering are, of course, seismology also. It is not only earthquake engineering, are the recordings of ground accelerations during earthquakes. This is a statement to see he made actually. Okay, and a knowledge of the ground motion say is essential to an understanding of the earthquake behavior of structure. So this is a statement to see he made it. So what? So of course, this is for the the earthquake engineering, but in seismology also. So if you want to understand seismic waves, how do you find out magnitude? So to find out magnitude, you should have an instrument. If you don't have instrument to record seismic waves, you can't find magnitude. Okay, so even seismology also, if you want to find out P wave, S wave, amplitudes and others, data is the starting point itself. There is no mechanics or something like that. You have data, you take logarithm of the surfaces, you get surface wave magnitude. If you have data, you take logarithm of P wave amplitudes, you will get MB. So like that only it comes. So the starting points in earthquake engineering and seismology, both the core is this ground motion data. So this is the most important thing in earthquake engineering and seismology. This is the starting point. So no mechanics comes later. Generally in advanced structural mechanics or our engineering say, okay, so everybody says that the first thing is Newton's laws, conservation of linear momentum, conservation of angular momentum. We study on all those things. But in this subject, the starting point is data itself. Okay, so since this data is very, very important for our understanding, because we don't know what is happening inside the earth. So so people have instrumented the whole earth itself. Not only this one, as already I told you, to understand quakes on earth, say people have sent now seismographs to Moon and Mars also. So you have seen, right, last week NASA has landed, right, that Perseverance rover, and then it also has a seismograph with it, that has been sent in InSight mission, and this also. So to understand the basic, how the planet works, or to find out, say, all those details also, we require this ground motion data. So because this data is so precious, say, okay, so several strong motion instruments people have bought and they have been installed, in various parts of the world itself. And in the olden days, very little data was there, but now we have data from lot of the earthquakes. So once you have lot of data, so by analyzing this data, you can understand the mechanics, you can understand the physics also, how these earthquakes are getting generated and how these ground motions looks like, and then you can even study behavior of your structures, say, when subjected to these type of ground motions. So these are some of the old and the strong motion arrays. So this was for Imperial Valley earthquake 1979. So you can see this red line is the fault, Imperial fault, they say. So people already know that Husner you followed, right? Caltech people, they know that there was a fault there. So they have put up lot of instruments. You can see here, these are all the instruments which are crossing the fault. You see, they have put up fully instrumented, and when these 1979 Imperial Valley earthquakes, they were able to record this earthquake at all these stations. Okay, now similarly this is for Northridge earthquake. So they already know that there was a fault here. They were expecting 6.4 or some magnitude. So they have instrumented the full this region. They have got to see that beautiful this acceleration time histories for this earthquakes itself. Now in India also, say, in those olden 1980 IIT Roorkee, say, okay, so there were some great professors, was Jay Krishna. You should know these names, okay? Jay Krishna, he was a professor in IIT Roorkee, okay? So he started the Department of Earthquake Engineering are, you know, in the olden days. So because in the olden days, some Caltech, they had a collaboration. So our India also established this strong motion arrays in old days, in strong motion arrays. So in Northeast and in Himalayas, okay, because earthquakes are frequent in Northeast, so they have put up. So these are all the instrument stations. Can you see here? So this is Bokajan. You know, this is a station in Northeast. Then we have Ma Shillong is here, Nongstong, you see, Masnaram, Silichar, you see. So these are all the stations was there, and these stations have recorded is a 5.9 magnitude earthquake, 7.2 magnitude earthquake, 6.4, 6.1. This is one of the older, 1986 or 1988. Around that, this array was working. They have recorded, you see, lots of data for some 4 or the 5 earthquakes. Now this is also one more in Uttar Pradesh actually, okay, Himalayan region. So here also at that time people have put up the instruments. IIT Roorkee, Srinagar. This is not Jammu Kashmir. There is one more Srinagar in Uttarakhand, Almora, Uttarkashi. You can see here Mussoorie, Tehri, where the dam is constructed. So all these places, the strong motion instruments have been put up to record this earthquakes. So whenever an earthquake occurs, they record this data. Okay, even Badrinath also, you see, there is a station. Joshimath is there. So like that, many Pithodgarh, many places, you see, they have put up these instruments. So now this is also one more in Himachal Pradesh. This recorded, I think many earthquakes in Himachal, like you say Chamba. You can see here, then Manali, there are all strong motion stations was there, very old arrays, and they are all maintained by IIT Roorkee. Okay, so Dharmashala earthquake, 1986 or somewhere, 5 magnitude. They have recorded a lot of earthquakes with these arrays. Now this is a recent network. Okay, this was also started by IIT Roorkee in 2000. PESMOS data, they say. They have done all kinds of GPS, they have done everything. So these are the new stations. You can see Silichar is here, Dimapur, Gauhati, and there are several you follow, right? The stations are there. Even in our IIT Gauhati, where I was working in 2005, so I myself have installed some 6 instruments actually. One instrument was in our IIT Gauhati itself, and we have recorded a lot of earthquakes in the Northeast India, Dibrugarh, many places are there. Then this is the recent, the array, that PESMOS array, they say. This is also done by IIT Roorkee. Okay, they have installed these instruments. So they have recorded even, many, that whatever you followed, right? Sikkim earthquake, many earthquakes have been recorded. Gangtok, you can see many stations are there. So these are the instruments. Nowadays, internet has come, and it is very easy. So where do they put this, install this type of instruments? Which buildings will have these type of instruments? So if you want to install these instruments, you should have a power source. You followed, the power source should be there, and then satellite link, or this internet and other things also has to be there. Okay, so now so they have installed all these instruments in school buildings, government, school buildings, or you followed, right, some type of government offices, say passport office, or some government offices. So where they will be having a power supply, and then some security will be there, you see, like that. So they have put up all these instruments. So these are the instruments, say. So each instrument will have a satellite link, and other things will be there. Once so sitting in Roorkee, say, so they can download, you followed it, all the data from these instruments. Otherwise, you go to that place every year, and then you copy the hard disk, and then you install once again, restart this hard disk itself. Okay, so like this. So now these events, so this is the older data in India. So the first, of course, Koina was there, but in Northeast India, through that arrays, they have recorded this Nepal-India border 1980, 84, 86, so many earthquakes was there. Then Uttarkashi earthquakes in 6.9. So this was also recorded. Chamoli was there. Many, and the Kutch earthquake was also recorded in 2001, but this was recorded not good in Ahmedabad. This is some building, and this is one atlas, we say. All of you, you can, if you go to Google, and then if you type Atlas of Strong Motion Records, okay. So this was released by IIT Roorkee in December, the 2001. So this contains the data of all these, the earthquakes itself. And of course, this I showed you. Gujarat also recently, one of the best networks in India. So they have, strong motion, and they have broadband also. Both a combination is there in Gujarat, and now I think lots of data is there. But nowadays the problem is if you want to get this data, say nobody is giving free of cost. So they say you have to pay a charge or so many fall. It's very, very difficult to get data from this the agencies. So this is one Koina earthquake. Already I showed you in the previous slides also. This was one of the earliest 11, 12, 1967, and this was also recorded by that Jay Krishna. I told you, right? He is a very famous professor in IIT Roorkee. He passed away. Chandrasekharan Das. There is a paper in BSSC also. So this is for the Uttarkashi. I already showed you, like 0.31 G was observed. You see, 0.19, 0.25. You see, 0.04 also. These things was observed. Now this is for in the northeast. I think some earthquake. This is, I think, Cherrapunji. This is a station. Then so things are there. Now this is in Sikkim earthquake, 2011. Okay, the magnitude was 6.9. Okay, Sikkim earthquake. So we have at Chungthang, okay, Gangtok, Gazing, Mangan. So these are all the time histories which was recorded during this the earthquake itself. Of course, some data has a problem, like small issues are there, but these are the overall the stations itself. Then so now so if you like this, you see, if you count, say, there are enormous amounts of data sets are available. So these in India, if you count worldwide, say almost Japanese data, I think Bhargavi has worked, I think 1 lakh or some 2 lakhs are there. Then if you see in US, there are something almost huge amounts of data sets are available. Almost maybe some 10 lakh or 20 lakhs, you see, the time histories are available. Okay, so most large amounts of data sets are available now. In olden days very few was there, but now too much data sets are there. So now the question comes is, how do we model the data? Now, how to model this data, or how can we derive whether we, so now how do we how to choose, you see, the design PGA to follow using this data sets itself. Okay, so this is the question. Okay, how to model the data. So previously in olden days very few informations was there. Now too much of information is there. So now how do we identify, you followed, right, which one I have to do, and how do we model this data and others. So if you see here, I have plotted I'm showing you a graph which has lot of accelerations are there here. Okay, so Imperial Valley earthquake, Parkfield, San Fernando, Iran, if you plot, say, all of them look like this. These are the velocities actually. So now if you look at these acceleration time histories, say, what is that you observe? Can you are you able to observe any patterns in this data? If you look at the first column, so the accelerations, what type of patterns you can observe? Any pattern is there in all the earthquake time histories?
It is like first one.
Yeah, how they are looking?
First the PJ values are very less and then gradually increasing.
Gradually increasing. No, what is that you observe? Whenever you look at the time histories, how they are looking towards you? How do you feel when you look at these time histories? The natural thing I'm asking you, whenever you look at this time histories, what is the opinion you get first time when you see, say?
So we say amplitude.
Amplitude? No, you think like a fresher. You followed, right? Whenever somebody shows you these type of time histories, what is the observation? What is the first feeling you get when you look at this data?
So all are within 40 seconds.
Okay, that is a 40 seconds. That is fine. But the first observation, when you look, what is that, you can make it out. Are they familiar to you? See, the duration is one aspect, but how do they look like generally? First observation is, they are all, what is that I have written here? They look like easy.
Complex.
Complex.
That's all, Why do you go for amplitude and others? See, suppose if the earthquake was like this, say, what is your comment?
It's a repeated one for a time.
So you say sinusoidal wave. That's all. No, sinusoid means you are all happy because you have already studied in dynamics actually. Response to sinusoidal excitation, you know everything. But how do they look like? They look like a sinusoid. You followed. How do they look like? They all complex. They are not even sinusoids. They don't have, whether they have a periodicity or whatever. They are all looking complex. And each time history you look, say this time history you look, this time history you look, they look entirely, the different actually. This one is different. This one has some duration. This has long duration. That has small duration. It is a complex, and then the exact word to represent is erratic actually. You followed. They are erratic, complex, erratic. You don't know what they followed, right? What type of functions they are. They are not looking like a sinusoidal also. But one thing what you can observe in all of them is they start from 0, okay, and they keep on oscillating. Maybe somewhere they will go to the maximum value, and then once again they are coming back to 0. All the time histories here also, they start with 0. They keep on oscillating. They go to the maximum value or something, and then you see they come back to 0. This is a pattern which is common in all these time histories. But from 0, but in between, you see they do whatever they like, and they're very erratic, and they're very complex, and they are not like our sinusoidal time histories or anything like that. So this makes our life complex actual earthquakes. So how do we you follow, right, understand these time histories, and then how do we do design, or how to do the analysis, you followed. So these are all the questions which comes in to our mind when you are looking for these time histories for the first time. Okay. So anyway, I think our time is over, so I will stop here. So tomorrow we will see how to model this time histories. Okay. So on the slides, the first unit is over. That slides I will send it to you in WhatsApp, our CA6320. So you can view the slides also. And all of you